Alright, so this is the animation that we have so far. And there's still a few things that I think we can tackle, even though most of the image is in place. I think there's a few finishing touches and fixes we can do. For example, at one point you see the shadow of the sphere onto the background, which is good, but it's a little too sharp. It's not motion blur. So there's actually a way to fake that motion blur in Nuke um, using a node called offload, and I'm gonna show that in a second. Also, I think I want to get more contact on the sphere, so more shape, because it looks a little flat now in the field side. It's probably because of the ambient light, because we don't have any real GI solution in my software. Same thing about the sphere. I'd like to have some kind of contact between the sphere and the ground. And I probably will want to separate the button from the background, because I think it still blends a little bit. Also, I was gonna try and add a little bit more texture here on the wall, and I was gonna do that in a very cheap way, which is appropriate for like a small assignment like this one. And finally, I probably was gonna try to add some God rays, and we can see a few ways that we can do that. So let's get started. Let's first tackle this shadow. So let's create a new backdrop, and let's call it offload. Remember, when you move those around, you want to press Control, otherwise they're gonna drag whatever is underneath them. Okay, so I'm gonna go here and call this offload. So offload stands for optical flow and is a really useful tool in Nuke. So if you type offload, it's a little heavy, so I would use it with a little bit of caution. So what you would do is go and isolate these two elements, the posters and the wall, which we can easily do because we have a matte for that. Okay, which is coming from this image. So I think this is one of the rare occasions that I'm gonna probably duplicate it, so we don't have to have graphs flowing everywhere. Okay, so in this case, I think this can be a little small actually. So we're gonna have this image. So we're gonna take and shuffle out the red. So we get that, right? Then we're gonna shuffle out the green. And then we're gonna shuffle out the blue. Then we're gonna select all of them and press M for a merge. And we're gonna change this to disjoint over. We might get a little bit of issues with the what do you call those? Edges where they intersect, but it should be okay. I will want to remove this item from here though. So I'm gonna go here and do in, and I think I already have the shape from before. Yeah, so I'm gonna just copy that into the in. Okay, so the final result should hopefully, oh, it should be out, sorry. We can invert it. Okay, cool. Oh, there's also that button. Really? I don't remember choosing that. Crap. Alright, I think I have another map with just that button. Right? Oh no. Oh well, let me adjust the bezier so that the button isn't there. This is kind of a pain in the ass. Crap. No, it's fine, because at the end of the day we won't really have to do offload around the button. Yeah, they never intersect, so I think we'll be fine. I might just need to do a final in so that the region that we're dealing with is only outside of the button. So let me find out where the button is. Okay. So let's turn this into an out. If you press Ctrl and Shift, when you drag something, you will replace it. Okay. And you can press, you can drag this so we can remove the button. And hopefully this holds up during the course of the animation, so let's check that to make sure. Okay, yeah, so this is good. Alright, so now that we have this very complicated graph, we were able to isolate the wall. Now, what we want to do is do an in, so that we only grab, well actually, offload is pretty heavy as a node, right? Because it interpolates the frames. So we actually want to do it as soon as possible, so that we don't have to wait on all these calculations for the offload to do its job. We want to be able to get the offload to do its job as quickly as possible. So, and we also probably will want to turn it on and off only during those frames, because we don't want it to calculate for the full length. We only really need it for, like, a few short frames, right? So I'm gonna grab this and stick it into the offload just for now, just to see what we're doing. Now the settings will be speed of 1, so the speed doesn't change, because we don't want to change the speed, we just want to interpolate the frames. Then shutter time, we're going to increase it to maybe 2, and samples, let's say 10. So you see what it's doing? It's taking two frames that are similar, that are next to each other, and it's blending them. It's trying to kind of figure out the difference between the two frames. The more samples you have, the better, but in this case the animation is so fast that even having more samples might not help. Let's try to change the shutter time to 1, and this to 5, 10. So you see this is before and after. So let's press play. Now the shutter should be a little blurrier. Okay, so it should look a little better. You can keep playing with the settings to try and find a sweet balance between a sharp shadow that kind of looks a little motion blur, and I get this before and after. You see, it's helping to blend. So I think 0.75 is probably the best choice. Alright, now we only want to use this for certain frames and only inside this area, because we don't want the volcano to be affected, right? So because of that, we won't be using this for the offload, but only the region of this image inside the alpha that we made. So this is going to be an in. So when you look at the, you have to press Shift X. So now when you look at this, we're telling the offload to only do its operations inside this alpha. And then once we have this, you can see that we have an alpha here. We're going to put this back on top, like that, with a simple over. So you can see now that everything will be the same, but we're getting a little bit motion blur shadows. We can actually make it a little bit blurrier, right? Now if we go on any frame, you can see the offload will be calculated, right? We don't want that. So actually gonna change this over so that it doesn't work up until those frames where the motion blur shadows will be required. So we're actually going to animate it. So we're going to go frame, okay, so we're going to go on frame 213, set this to 0, and we're going to go frame 220, set this to 1, okay, and then set this to 1. So over the course of one frame, it goes on and it goes off. So hopefully now what we should see is that this is not being calculated on all those frames, right? You see that it's not being illuminated. So if you play, you should move pretty fast up until we hit those frames. And the reason why this is not being used is because this, if we look at this node, because that is off, we don't need to worry about any of that. Nuke is pretty smart. You see now it's being illuminated only on those frames. When one of the nodes is illuminated, it means that it's being calculated. Okay. So because we put this at the beginning of the flow, hopefully it's gonna have a really easy time because all the other computations are going to be computed afterwards. So we shouldn't have too much slowdown. As you can see, it's calculating pretty fast. Alright, so now that we have those blur shadows, so they're not as stroby, let's worry about getting some shaping on that sphere. Alright, so I usually tend to color nodes that are being used for fixes a bright pink, so that you know when you've made a fix. It's kind of ugly, which is kind of the point. It jumps when you know that something was done to fix something that was broken. It's not an aesthetic change. So let's keep going down. Let's add shaping to the sphere. So I'm gonna be called this reshape. Actually, sphere down. That's usually what I use. Sphere down. It's called this lava sphere down. Okay. And I'm gonna be making the image a little darker. So let's look at it. Now the whole image should be darker, right? But we only want to use the alpha of the sphere. So this image. Okay. So I'm gonna be coming here and I'm gonna be using the alpha. So the sphere is blue, so we only want that, and we only want it inside that area. So I'm gonna grab an in operation and I'm gonna slap it. Okay, and I'm gonna drag it out, take a look at it. So we really only want, actually let's invert it, because we don't want any of this stuff. And I don't think the sphere ever intersects with this object, so I think we'll be okay. Let me double check. Okay, on this frame is a little close, but again, I don't think they ever intersect. If this shot was a stereo shot, where there's two screen left and right frames, I probably wouldn't risk this. I would just have a matte that is cleaner, doesn't have elements that come close to each other. But for this shot, I think it's gonna be fine. Yeah, because it's not a moving shot camera. Okay, so we don't want to color correct the whole sphere to be darker. We want to color correct only the bottom. So now that we have this alpha here, we can use kind of the same trick that we did for the posters when we wanted a drop shadow. We can do an out operation. We can blur this image. We can transform it and we can put it back inside. So what we're getting now is a very, very thin line that we can expand, right? We can press Shift X so that we invert the inputs of the node. The out is very sensitive about that, so it's really important that you get the order of operation right. And I'm going to actually show you an expression that you can use to get the size of the blur to affect the translation on those axes. If you control click, you can create an expression. So now when I change the size of the blur, I'm getting this kind of automatic situation here. Now if you don't want the translation on the X to be exactly the same, you can press equal, and you can say, for example, divided by 2. So now there's an expression that gets the translation of this to be driven by the size of the blur. Very simple. And now we're getting some beautiful, nice, subtle shading. We may even want to split this so it's also divided by 2, so that we get a little bit more subtle shading. Right, so we probably don't want this to be happening throughout the whole shot. But let me check what it looks like. Yeah, because I think it's too strong here. Let me check what happens if I make this a little smaller. So it's actually, we're probably gonna have to animate these settings. So starting a frame 220, we're gonna keep this 81, and at 219 I'm gonna set this to like 20. So let's see how that looks like. If you want to change the animation, you can go on the curve editor and you can tweak it here, so you can see in real time the changes there. So I think 12 was actually a better idea. Yeah, that's pretty good. I think it's kind of looking a little dirty, so rather than just darkening the image, I'm actually gonna tint it a little bit. If you press Control and click, you can pick colors from the shot. So in this case, I probably want to go a little less saturated. Okay, and let's see what this looks like at the end. I think it might be too dark, so let's make it a little brighter. Okay, and at the beginning of the shot, I think the sphere is a little too bright. So what we could do is probably color correct it a little bit, but it's not super high priority. Let's move on to something a bit more interesting. I think we could get a little bit extra shadow at the very bottom, so we might actually do this again, but with different settings. So lava sphere down contact, let's say, and let's see, that's the alpha. So we're probably gonna grab this old chunk of stuff, we're gonna copy and paste it, and we're gonna do this again, right? But this time we're gonna have different settings, so that the translation on the X is actually, we're gonna actually break the connection, so no animation, say 0, so it's perfectly straight down. And then for that, we're gonna actually remove the expression. Let's take equal and say divided by 4. Let's remove the expression, and it's actually translated by hand. Let's see, because we really only want to affect that area, so we actually might want, I think the easiest way is actually to use a gradient in this case. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's do a in, and then use a Bezier. So we're gonna force the contact to only appear right there. And again, this is something that you usually would not need to do. You probably could render an occlusion pass or anything, but Maya software is particularly ancient and hasn't been updated in a while, so you kind of have to fake it. Now, because we are using this bezier, we probably don't need to worry about the sphere over there at the beginning of the shot. Okay. So let's see what this does. So I think this helps a lot. Definitely, these two steps got us in a really good place. Okay. Boink, boink. Yeah. We might be getting a little bit of an edge here. In that case, what you can do, and I think that's only because of this color correction is pretty drastic. You can use a node called erode and change the size to -1, and this will actually grow your alpha. So if you look at it at the alpha A, before and after, it's growing it. So that allows you to fix edge issues. You see, in this case, the alpha is growing a little too much, so -2 might be too much. Let's try -1. So it's pretty subtle, but it fixes some of the issues. You might get an extra halo, but yeah, I think it's actually fine, because we're using the bezier to limit the space where the color correction takes place. Alright, so something else we can do. I spoke a little bit about how these kind of straight shapes were kind of ugly. So let me see. Let me actually create a new backdrop so we know this is just for the sphere. I think it's really important when you're working Nuke to have a clear label for everything you do, because these shots might get passed around, or someone might open it, or you might open it a while later. So you want to know exactly what you did and why you did it. Opening a new script after a long time can be pretty challenging otherwise. So I'm gonna call out this like the lava sphere, so we know from the distance what that is. Alright, so there's this node called lens distort, and this is not really what it was meant to be used for, but it's pretty amazing to break stuff that is a little too CG-ish. So you see, what it's doing is that it's distorting the image so that you don't get these straight lines. It bends them a little bit like a fisheye. And it's particularly useful for shots that are really close to the ground, where otherwise you will get these unnatural, really straight lines. Now what you can see is that it's shrinking the image. So what you might have to do in this case is scale it a little bit afterwards. So scale is something like 1.05, let's say, so that you don't get to see these funky edges. Hopefully it won't change your composition much. Let's do that. Alright, so I think this helps a little bit. Something else you can do when you're working in a shot, if you want to make it look a little bit less CG, is add a little bit of noise to your image. Oops, haha, I think it's called grain here. There's a lot of plugins you can use, so I recommend that you go and look around for plugins you can use. I wouldn't add too much, but just a little bit to break it up. And I probably would go half as much. Okay. And for this, actually that was the size. The size was actually good, sorry. I like the size. I think the intensity was a little too much. So I'm gonna set this in half, alright? So it's pretty subtle, but it should hopefully help keeping the image alive. And I would usually definitely add those in the end. So again, I'm gonna create a backdrop so that when you open the shot, you know where these things are. And I'm gonna call these finishing touches. Okay. so touchy. Okay, and I'll make these golden because finishing touches are golden. And I'm gonna, okay, and let's move this down. Something else we can do. So this button was is not separating very well. So let's see what we can do to make it stand out a little better. I think I have a mat for it. I have one for that, and I have one for that. So we're gonna need both of them, okay? And so we're gonna go here, and we're gonna use those. Use a shuffle. This is a lot of the same stuff, as you can see. It's very repetitive. But it allows you to go further with your renders than you would if you were just using Maya software or even any other render. These are things that I do routinely, regardless of what renderer I use. And you don't have to use all these Beziers. If you wanted to, you could actually just have a different ID mat for every single element you need, so that you don't have to mask them out. But I don't mind doing this, to be honest. I'd rather work with less images than having to worry about those Beziers. Beziers are fine. So let's do an over, disjoint over. Okay. I wonder why I get that. I think that's a depth of field issue, most likely. Because Maya's depth of field is not physical. It's kind of a cheat. So it's probably not respecting the alpha correctly. Alright, so I'm gonna call this button separation. Alright, and I'm gonna go here and make it a little brighter, right? So we make it twice as bright. So now it finally separates from that. And also it makes it a little bit, oops, what is that? Yeah, always check your frames over the course of the animation. You can press C to cusp these edges. So I don't think this is the Bezier. So I think I'm gonna copy it, paste it, and Control Shift, drag over to replace it. Whatever. Holy crap. Okay. Sorry, made a mistake. Cool. Alright. So let's see. So now that we have some kind of bright spot here, we might actually want to start thinking about glows. So usually glows are something that I leave for the end, so it's appropriate to do it now. And let's call this button. Oh shit. Let's call this button. Sometimes if you are not in the right spot and you start typing, you can get in trouble. So button. And let's make this a grayish, because the button is gray. Alright. So we have a pretty complicated Nuke graph already. Cool. So usually when you glow stuff in Nuke, you might want to use an alpha to make sure that you are only glowing what you need. So we may glow this using the alpha from that. So let me grab you. Oops. Let me grab you. No, let me grab this guy. And then for the alpha, we're going to use this alpha, so Shift Y. Okay. And I'm not going to put it in the spine because I probably want to render the effect only. Let's see how bright. So we want to change the tolerance, okay? And okay, cool. We shouldn't be able to see the background though. That's weird. Isn't that the whole point of effect only? Yeah, I would recommend using a plugin to do this. I think this is a little silly. Let's do a in. So between that and that, okay. Shift X. So we only get the button, and then we only create a glow from the button. Let's make sure that we set the input to be there, okay? And effect only. And then you can plus it. Sorry, this isn't necessarily complicated, but the glow tool is pretty bad, to be honest, in Nuke. Something else you have to watch out for is that the alpha now around this area will be over 1 because the glow has alpha, which shouldn't have. So we're gonna shuffle and set the alpha channel to be black. So when we look at it now, the alpha is black. So when we plus it, the alpha isn't plussed with it. Because when you have an alpha over 1, you're gonna get in trouble sooner or later. So make sure the alpha is always 1 or less. Okay, so let's make it a little bigger. Okay, that looks okay. Let's see what else. Let's see how this works out. I think this little sphere might actually use some of the same principles we applied on the big sphere for the contact, because it's getting a little flat at times during the shot. I definitely miss a little bit of contact there, so I'm gonna do that now. I'm not a big fan of glowing the whole image, to be honest with you. So maybe we might just want to glow the sphere over there. So let's do the same principle. Let's find a map that has only the sphere, like in this case, this guy. And let's move it here. And let's copy the same shabam that we have. We paste it. Okay. And then we take this as the input. Oops. So what is this gonna do? We have to do an in phase here or out. So we separate that. Oops. So let's do that. If it doesn't connect, press Shift X. Let's do what this looks like. So we're gonna have to invert it. Okay, okay, okay. So you see, once you do it once, it's easier to copy and paste all the different settings. So again, just let's go over this once again. We have the alpha. We shuffle out. We remove the item with the bezier. Then we do an inside so that the whole image goes through the alpha. Then we glow it, and we set this to be effect only. Remove the alpha, and we plus it. The reason why I like to set it to this to effect only is because it allows me to tweak it more precisely. Okay. So I think what we might want to do now is maybe vignette the image a little bit. So I'm going to do this under the finishing touches. So I'm going to go here and call this vignette. Set this to probably 0.66. Okay, and I'm going to do radio. So type press tab towards this menu, come up, then press radio, shift Y, and the radio might have to be inverted actually. Okay, so we can then move it. Okay, so let's see what it does. Okay, so this is working out, and let's change the softness to 1, so it's good. Let's see what happens if I darken this more. Actually 0.6, very good. Something else we can do, let's see. Something I like to do every now and then is grab everything, every single color correction that I made, and seeing how they change the image. So I select all of them, and I just press D, and D will turn off all of the color corrections. So it's pretty big difference. We were able to get nice gradient, contact. I think we lost some of the gradient on the wall because of the vignette, so we might want to regain some of that. We added more shape in there. Yeah, so let's go back to the gradient for the wall, which I think is somewhere over here. Yeah. Let's make these a little darker. Okay. And I actually might want to brighten that. So I'm gonna call this wall white red down, and actually copy paste it and set this to be wall grade up. And then as far as the alpha goes, I'm gonna go and grab it right here, and I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna control drag here so we get a duplicate, but I'm actually gonna invert this. Okay, and then I'm gonna go here, press shift Y. Okay, then I'm gonna press control drag to make this a little bit of a better noodle, and then we probably want, I think this is probably the first ramp, not the second one. Let me double check. Okay, so now that we have the ramp, we want to go to the color correction here and make it brighter. Okay, and I also might want to tint it slightly towards warm. Okay, so you see how these two now work together. One darkens the bottom and one brightens it. Okay, I think the ramp could be a little wider. Let's see if we can change this smooth one. Okay, I think we might be going a little too far. So let's bring it back a little bit. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we're getting some decent gradient. Let me see how that works with the vignette, because there's probably an interplay between the two of them. We can play with the softness of the radio if we feel like the color correction is a little too strong. I think actually a 0.5 might be a little better. Alright, so let's see what else we can do to this image. Yeah, I was gonna just do the one very last thing. Probably add this kind of contact between the ground and the sphere, so the sphere isn't quite as flat on his field side. So the way to do that is similar to what we did with the lava sphere. So I'm gonna drag everything down, and let me see which map has. So that's the map that has the green thingy for the sphere. So I'm gonna take this and then I'm actually gonna just copy and paste this because it's practically the same thing. I'm gonna go to this sphere down, set this to green, Shift Y for the color correction. So now we're color correcting this darker, but we only want that to happen when it touches the ground. Luckily, it shouldn't be too difficult. We can use the same trick with the alpha here to try and limit this to the bottom of the sphere. So we can do that. Space here. Okay. So this was an in. We don't really need it right now. We can just do that. Or shuffle, sorry. Shuffle. And then we're getting that. And let's see. So now this is darkening the bottom, which is actually good. I feel like that feels already more realistic. But it's probably gonna look a little funky at certain frames. It's actually, no, actually looks pretty good. I'm pressing D over and over. Yeah, that feels much better, feels much more grounded. So yeah, they came out pretty well. Let's see what else we can do. Let me label this so we know what that stuff is. Press Ctrl to drag it. So we call this char sphere. Okay. Color, let's change it to neutral, maybe orange, because of the hair. And I think the one last thing we might want to do is add a little bit of God rays here, and I probably will want to do that at the end, towards the finishing touches. So there's a script called God rays you can use, and you can use it to plus this on top of the image, and let's see what this does. You want it to feed something, like a bezier for example, right? So once you feed it to the God ray thingy, you can then place your God rays. And then, let me see. So this is going to be the window, the bezier we just created. And then the God rays will create God rays based on that. So what you could try to do is, rather than having a single bezier, you could have multiple ones, and you could move them around to create multiple openings. You could also create a noise pattern if you wanted to, and you could overlap them as you see fit, and then you can just blast them, right? The kind of splotchiness is because of the steps. You can change it to 10, for example. There's things like scale you can change. What I usually do, I usually do in, and I use a ramp. So type ramp, and I connect a ramp so that I only get God rays inside this ramp. So let's pretend the God rays are coming from above, right? So we might want to place this somewhere like over here, and then we might have to translate. So I'm going to create a transform here. We may want to translate all these Beziers somewhere over there. Okay. Something that you might want to be careful with is moving items outside of the field of view, because Nuke can be a little iffy when you do that. So now the God Ray center is right there, right? And these items are here, here, here. So we might actually want to scale them, right? And we could even blur them a little bit. I think there may actually be a setting for blurring here. No, there's not. Yeah, we could actually blur them so that we soften those God rays. And this is obviously a big cheat. We could also do those for real in instead of Maya software. Maya software is actually surprisingly decent at God rays. So, I mean, in this case, they're really subtle. I mean, they will be really subtle once I go to correct them. So I'm gonna call these God rays CC. I'm gonna make them much dimmer and color it a little warm. So they should almost be unnoticeable. I kind of want this to maybe a little smaller so that you feel the individual shards. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, it's pretty subtle. It's almost imperceptible, but I think it helps to lift the blacks. If you want to do this in Maya, you could just create a spotlight and enable the God rays on it. I don't think this shot really demands us to do it, so I don't think I'll show it. I think that sphere is too bright at the beginning of the shot. So, going back to the lava sphere, I'm probably gonna add a color correction to brighten it at the end, but darken it at the beginning, because at the end it feels a little dull, to be honest, but it feels a little too bright at the beginning. I'll be using the same setup so that it's relative to the drop shadow. So once again, we take all this stuff and we copy paste it, crop, and we use that. Okay, so we separate it, and now rather than using this expression divided by 2, I'll divide by -2. Same thing here, I'll divide by -2, so that we get the inverted effect. Okay, and then as far as the size, which is animated, we're gonna have to judge it once we get in here. So this will darken, so this is gonna be a CC for the lava sphere. Okay, initially it will be darkening it, but in the second half of the shot we'll be using to brighten the image. Okay, so you see how it's allowing us to bring this back a little bit. Yeah, probably something like 0.85 is good. Then around frame 223 we can keep so that it actually brightens it. Let's see what 1.5 will do. Okay, let's go to the curve editor and tweak it. So we're brightening it. Okay, so let's see before and after. So it is definitely helping the shaping. If we take these 3 color corrections out, it gets super flat, so I think we did a pretty good job at reshaping it. I think the yellow is getting a little dingy. That's probably because we rendered this image in 8-bit, not 32-bit, which means that the brightest the color gets is just 1. Even if it's blowing out, it's probably clipping at 1. Yeah, you see? So that's probably why. Right, so let's go back to the bottom and see what we did. I think we're pretty much done. Yeah, I think we're pretty much done with this. Something that I do sometimes with images is a chromatic aberration, and it's not something that you have to do, but it can help to make the image look a little bit more convincing. So the way to do it is you take a lens distortion and you apply it to the individual channels separately. So you take the green channel, you take the red channel, okay, and you take the green channel, okay, you take the blue channel, and you separate them, okay, and then you plus them all back together, so they get the exact same image, which, okay, and we can change the alpha of this image back to 1 after the fact, and we can use that as our source, so that we bring it back to exactly what it used to be. And now that we have the image separated in 3 channels for a portion of this graph, what we're gonna do is apply a different lens distortion to at least 2 of those channels. And because of that, we're gonna get these kind of funky edges. But only on the edges of the frame, which is kind of cool. And we can actually apply different settings to some of those. Let's say like 1, let's say 2. We don't need to apply to the 3rd one because they already are disconnected because I did it to 2 of them. So you see how it's adding a little bit of nice fringing that makes this look a little bit more natural. Combined with the lens distortion, these steps go a long way in getting an image to look a little bit more less CG, more like it was shot with a real camera. Okay. So I think this ends the demo. I don't think there's anything else that I would do to the image. I think it's working pretty well. Maybe the sphere gets a little bright at times, but overall, I'm pretty satisfied. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the demo. Thank you.